Welcome to Nithrine's Art World. I'm a dancer and a visual artist with a background in graphic art and psychology. In this podcast, I'll be exploring a variety of topics, from book reviews to dance analysis, through an artistic lens. I hope you enjoy the journey. Hello, this is Nithrine. Welcome to the 11th episode of Season 2 of my podcast. It's lovely to speak with you again. Happy New Year! During my winter holiday, I finally completed a very important mission, reading the comic book Nana all the way to the latest episode. For those unfamiliar with it, Nana is a drama manga written and illustrated by Ai Yazawa, centering on two young women who share the name Nana. It was serialized from 2000 to 2009 in the Japanese magazine Cookie, becoming a generational phenomenon. The live-action film adaptation was also a major hit, and the animated series gained international popularity with translations into various languages. As a teenager growing up in Japan in the 2000s, I was one of the many hooked on this dramatic manga, captivated by its dynamic character development, delicate artwork, and unique fashion sense. However, at some point, I stopped reading for many reasons. Coming back to Nana as an adult after a long break has been a strangely healing experience. It helped me understand why certain parts of the story were difficult to grasp as a teen and how the piece reflected the cultural atmosphere of the time. In this episode, I will unpack some of the traumas of the era as reflected in Nana. Fair warning, there will be spoilers. If you haven't read the manga yet and want to avoid spoilers, please come back after you've read it. 1. Toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is the biggest reason I fell out of love with Nana, and reading it again now, my feelings are even stronger. Most of the male characters in Nana are sexists with deeply patriarchal ideas about relationships, with few exceptions, like minor characters such as Kyosuke. Despite their skinny figures and pretty faces, which align with shoujo manga aesthetics, these male characters in Nana reflect what were considered the normal attitudes of men toward women at the time. It was a painful reality for me as a teenager, but now I can examine it from a healthier distance. I am actually impressed by Yazawa's abilities to incorporate such realistic social tensions in this dreamy manga. Take the example of one of the Nanas, who is called Hachi by her friends. Because Nana means 7 in Japanese, apparently they thought it would be funny to call her 8. Hachi is also a name of the famously loyal dog in Japanese history. Many recognize her personality as dog-like because she is sweet but dependent. Hachi's personality creates a clear juxtaposition with the other Nana, who's a loner. However, it's not very funny to see Hachi being treated worse than a dog sometimes. I always knew the rock star Takumi was a manipulative jerk, but rereading the manga, I realized that Hachi's first official boyfriend, Shoji, also exhibits abusive tendencies. That is, even before he cheats on her with his colleague. Hachi meets Shoji through her best friend Junko at university in her hometown. Although they are mutually attracted to each other, Hachi hesitates to take their relationship in a romantic direction due to trauma from her high school days. They spend time as platonic friends until a group trip, during which Shoji suddenly lashes out at Hachi accusing her of being clingy with her friends and not being realistic about her future. He even harshly blames her for friend-zoning him and not caring about others' feelings. Worst of all, he leaves her crying on an unfamiliar street at night. While it's true that Hachi can be selfish and overly dependent on her friends, there's no justification for Shoji bullying her in this way, let alone guilting her for setting emotional boundaries. Even after they began dating and moved closer to each other in Tokyo, Shoji offers a little to no support as Hachi adjusts to a new environment. On the very day after her arrival, she cleans his flat and makes dinner, but he doesn't thank Hachi. Instead, he scolds her for not immediately finding a job or her own place. However, when Hachi does later start working and vents to him about her colleagues, he gets frustrated. He is equally unhappy when Hachi forms a strong bond with Nana and expresses her admiration for her musical talent. To me, it seems Shoji doesn't truly like Hachi as a person. When Junko says Shoji loves Hachi so much, I struggled to understand what she meant. The explanation seemed to hinge entirely on Shoji's efforts to work toward marriage with Hachi despite being in his early 20s. At one point, Shoji confesses that his inability to provide for Hachi as a poor art student is quote-unquote hurtful for a man. His irritability and coldness stem not only from Hachi's behavior, but also from the pressure he places on himself to fulfill traditional male expectations as a provider. To be fair, Hachi is also someone who dreams of being a cute wife with a happy family and a big house, which reinforces traditional gender roles. The problem is that Shoji never communicates his concerns to Hachi, and this lack of communication is a recurring issue among the male characters in Nana. For instance, another man, Ren, abandons the character Nana, a rock singer, when he senses she won't conform to the role of a housewife, without even verbally expressing his love for her. Similarly, Takumi constantly demeans Hachi, dismissing her contributions with comments like, "You know nothing, all you do is stay home and cook meals." These men exhibit poor communication skills and have little respect for women. What's unsettling is that such attitudes were relatively common at the time, particularly in the 2000s. However, there were exceptions. For instance, another shoujo manga serialized during the same decade, Nodame Cantabile, presents much more gender-neutral portrayals of romantic relationships. Reflecting on the 2000s, it becomes clear that this era was marked by a coexistence of conflicting ideas about gender roles and relationships, much like the contrasting heroines Nana and Hachi. 2. Sexual exploitation of minors. As mentioned briefly earlier, Hachi's first sexual and romantic experience as a teenager is traumatic. 17-year-old Hachi was groomed by a 29-year-old married man called Takashi. After a series of dates, either in his car or a motel at night, he suddenly breaks up with her because he's relocating to Tokyo for his work. Unsurprisingly, her trauma lingers in the shape of self-loathing and deep-seated distrust towards men. It's even more heartbreaking that this sort of ordeal was not necessarily seen as horrid as it is today. The sexualization of minors was much more normalized. For instance, the word enjo kosai, or sugar dating was selected as one of the most important new terms in Japan in 1996, only 4 years before Nana started. Research reveals that around that time, there was a rapid increase in the number of articles that sexualized high school girls. In 1996, the tendency to associate high school girls with the term enjokosai or sugar dating became particularly pronounced. Many recall how the mainstream media at the time didn't focus on the older men who sexually exploited girls. Instead, they blamed the minors who, quote unquote, seduce innocent men for high brand bags. A lack of legal protection didn't help either. Believe it or not, age of consent in Japan was changed from 13 to 16 only in 2023. So of course, when Hachi was a teen, the concept of grooming was not a common knowledge. I remember that there were much more slut-shaming comments against her than sympathetic voices back then. Unfortunately, I was also one of those who viewed her as a promiscuous girl rather than an underage victim of grooming. This was also due to the beautiful depiction of Hachi's view toward the relationship with Takashi. She later recalls it as an experience of loving a man and being loved back. And she tells herself it's enough and that she doesn't need to feel miserable. Now I understand it as typical trauma survivor's tactic to avoid facing reality, not only expression of Hachi's happy-go-lucky personality. The lack of protection was not limited to girls. Shin, a 15-year-old boy member of Nana's band Blast, also lives on prostitution targeting older women. One customer, Reira, later becomes his lover. These adults who exploit minors under the name of romance face no consequences in the manga, which reflected reality. Proper mental health care for survivors was out of the question, of course, which connects to the next point. 2. Poor mental health care. Most Nana characters could benefit from therapy. However, therapy is not a common practice in Japan. Research from 2022 reveals that only 6% of people in Japan have sought psychological counseling for mental health issues, compared to 52% in Europe and the US. As you can imagine, things were much worse 20 years ago. While reading reviews of Nana in both Japanese and English, I noticed the recurring criticism of Junko, Hachi's high school best friend. Many argue that Junko is unnecessarily harsh and judgmental toward Hachi, especially when Hachi is grappling with trauma from grooming or Shoji's betrayal. To be fair, Hachi can be frustrating at times, so it's not entirely surprising that Junko grows impatient. However, Hachi deserves compassion and support, which is largely absent in the friendship and throughout Hachi's past experiences. It's important to note that neither Junko nor Hachi's family are intentionally unkind. Rather, their inability to recognize Hachi's deeper emotional needs reflects a broader societal issue in Japan. Low emotional awareness and a lack of emphasis on mental health support are still common today, but they were even more so 20 years ago. 4. The pressure to be popular. As a teenager, I wasn't crazy about Hachi. Not just because she seemed lazy to a nerd like me, but because she embodied the mainstream values promoted by women's magazines of the era, mote and aisare, roughly translating to popular and lovable. This meant adhering to strict contradictory standards. Dye your hair, but not too brightly. Look sexy, but not too slutty. And definitely don't act too smart. That's not considered cute. Hachi, who feels empty inside and seeks validation from boys, seemed to me like the sad result of this media-driven campaign, which I strongly opposed at the time. Even though her fashion was more unique than what those magazines pushed, I found her far less relatable than the other heroine, Nana. Despite my lack of interest in punk music, Nana's desire to be accepted as a talented individual rather than a prototype of what a woman should be resonated with me. Now, rereading the story, I realized that Hachi suffered as much as I did under society's constant judgment of young women. She was often labeled a slut or told she was too much, which contributed to her lack of self-esteem. All she truly wanted was to feel loved, valued, and seen. Exactly what I wanted during my teens and 20s. 5. Suppressed queerness. This might be the most debated topic in the Nana fan community. Upon research, I found that some call Nana either queer baiting or secretly gay. I see it as neither. However, it's undeniable that Nana and Hachi's relationship is the most romantic and passionate one in the story. As mentioned earlier, the male characters fail to appreciate their romantic partners beyond traditional gender roles. While Nana and Ren share strong chemistry, Hachi's relationship with her boyfriends often feels shallow. It feels like those men's unique individuality doesn't really matter for her as long as they are attractive young guys. Even her old friend Junko points this out when discussing her dating history. In contrast, Nana and Hachi's relationship brims with romantic undertones. They express how the sight of each other gives them butterflies, describing their feelings with the innocence of a first crush. As a teenager, I overlooked how deeply passionate their bond was, but now I am struck by its intensity. They consistently stand up for each other and show unconditional love. For instance, Hachi finds a bassist for Nana's band, while Nana confronts Hachi's unfaithful boyfriend, comforts her, and even shares a bed with her later. Yes, a bed. The only element missing from their relationship is sexual intimacy. Nana explicitly states that she isn't interested in doing a girl, clarifying that her feelings for Hachi aren't lustful. This contrasts sharply with their relationships with men, which often seem rooted in sexual needs. The juxtaposition echoes Nobu, Nana's friend, question about the nature of heterosexual relationships. However, their bond transcends the typical narrative of pure female friendship through its portrayal of jealousy and possessiveness. Hachi, for instance, struggles with the intensity of these emotions, reconsidering her earlier belief that friendship between women is free from jealousy or heartbreak. While Nana's feelings remain platonic, Hachi shows subtle signs of sexual interest, even imagining an erotic scene between Nana and a fan, Misato. It's also important to remember that in the 2000s, positive representations of queer women were virtually non-existent in mainstream Japanese media. Until 2015, there wasn't even a partnership system for same-sex couples. Even today, same-sex marriage remains illegal in Japan. For a girl like Hachi, who dreams of becoming a homemaker, pursuing a queer relationship would likely have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Although physical intimacy is a vital part of romantic relationships for many, I can't help but wonder if Hachi and Nana had lived in a world where two women loving and living together was normalized. Would they have found their happy ever after? There's no definitive answer, but it's remarkable how Yazawa crafted such a nuanced and romantic story between two women, leaving room for multiple interpretations. Overall, Nana captures the realities of its time through dreamy artwork, weaving a beautiful tapestry of drama. Like any masterpiece, it reveals new layers with every reread. How was today's episode? I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please consider leaving a review or reaching out through the contact form linked in the description. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye for now.